Hello, and welcome to That Nerd Thing, where we uncover the magical impact that fandoms have on our lives. I'm Morgan, and today I am joined by somebody else that I met on Threads. I'm really loving Threads, by the way, which is, highly recommend. But I am joined today by Demand from the Demand Does podcast. Hello, Demand. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Thank you for taking time out to talk to a perfect stranger.
Everybody who comes on my show, we're strangers, and then afterwards I'm like, I think I'm best friends with you now.
That happens a lot in the podcast space, I've noticed.
So can you tell listeners a little bit about your podcast and maybe why you started it and what it is?
My podcast is called Demand Does. The name comes obviously from my first name, and also I don't have a fandom that I don't have a subject that I feel like I would pursue forever and ever and ever, amen. So I figured if I do Demand Does, then if I switch to something else, I still did it. So, I mentioned earlier, it's kind of a focus for my hyperfixations. The main part of it is the 6 questions where I interview interesting people, a lot of creatives, and I ask them all the same 6 questions. And the tagline is the same 6 questions can tell a unique story. And everybody has a different story, and every conversation goes in a million different ways. And I've had a couple other things that I've been doing with the show. Recently, I had this really strange idea that's only funny to me, probably. And it's a joke between me and my sister. She was a Samuel Jackson. She's been a Samuel Jackson fan since Coming to America. And so for some reason, that's tickled me. And I thought, man, you know what? If Samuel Jackson's in the movie, it's a Samuel Jackson movie. And I tested my idea, and I rewrote the plot of Triple X, the Vin Diesel movie, with Augustus Gibbons as the star of the movie. I had a good time with it, and it turned out pretty well, and I got a decent response from it from, friends and stuff. So there's also the Bad Mother Movie Club.
That's so cool. That's awesome. And I love what you're doing, and I love how you said, the same 6 questions can tell, a different story. Because that's so true. Everybody has a different story and different answers. And I was listening to a few of your episodes, and one in particular that I listened to first was the episode you did with Megan from Vigilante Vibes. I love them over there. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And I learned so much about her. So I love it. I love that concept and that idea. And I totally agree with you. It's there's not one thing that you could have a podcast on. So being able to kind of shift gears and do different things, I totally get that, because that's how I feel about this podcast too. I don't just have one fandom I want to focus on.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, my first idea around the 6 questions was something similar to what you're doing.
Oh, cool.
I did a episode with Shlomo Sher, I believe his name is. He was in the video game business. I can't remember exactly what he did, but he was also a philosophy professor who also has a passion for building sandcastles. So you find, and that's all in one person. That's one interview, you know what I mean? So, we're all multifaceted in that way. And that's what I really like about it.
Yeah, everybody has a story to tell.
Yes, ma'am, they do.
So let's get into your story and your nerdy identity. Are you ready?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
What is the first thing that you were nerdy about?
I want to say martial arts and martial arts movies.
Oh, cool.
I've always been, to call myself an athlete would be a bit of a stretch, but I've always been active. Let's do it. Let's call it that way. And that's always been since I was small. And I watched Bruce Lee movies with my dad, and it just became a thing. And Karate Kid, of course, hit me. I was at the right age for that. And I remember this wasn't too terrible. It's a little about now. But I remember reading somewhere that what you wanted to be, or what you dreamt about when you were, 7 or 8 years old, you probably should be doing as an adult.
Ooh.
And so I asked my mom, I called my mom and said, hey, Mom, what did I tell you I wanted to be when I was 7? And she said, you told me you wanted to be a ninja. The funny part is I grew up to eventually be a pro wrestler for a little while in my past. And so I went from play fighting in my pajamas to play fighting in my underwear.
Wow. You were a pro wrestler?
Yes, ma'am.
Wow. What was that like?
If you combine the locker room atmosphere that you see in some of the football movies, it's not that stereotypical. Sometimes it is, but that kind of atmosphere combined with, I don't want to say The Office because I've never seen that show, but that type of atmosphere.
Okay.
where, because it's a business, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So you have your politics that gets played. Yeah, sometimes you have you have your bosses, whether you like them or not, that you have to please. It's really, it's a regular job on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a little literal, but
Yeah.
allegedly, I'm not accusing anybody.
So okay, so your first nerdy thing was like martial arts and martial arts movies, and that kind of impacted who you were in your life. That's super cool.
Yeah, my dad was really instrumental in that because we watched a lot of B
Mm-hmm.
movies as a kid, and so at least one of them was a martial arts movie. And he would take me to karate, and we did karate together when I was a kid. And every sport I tried, he was all right. Let's do it, do 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 do, and he was right behind me. And when I played soccer, and then he went to a few shows when I became a wrestler. That my parents have always been supportive in whatever zany idea I had for myself.
Awesome. What is your favorite nerdy thing?
Boy, that's.
It's a tough one.
Well, and it depends on, we talked about hyperfixations, and it's really depends on when you catch me. Because right now I'm in between because I'm doing
Yeah.
podcasting, which is probably my favorite thing to do right now. But
Okay.
outside of that, I still keep up with professional wrestling.
Yeah.
I still watch. I haven't caught up with it yet, but I'm still, Star Wars has been a thing for me as a
Mm-hmm.
kid. I'm like, there was a thing on Threads the other day where someone I'm assuming is roughly my age mentioned that after Return of the Jedi, there was a long gap between the end of Return of the Jedi and the prequels. And even before that, before they started writing the books, I think that was 3 or 4 years of just no Star Wars. And people, there of course, fast forward to now, people complain about the Acolyte, which shame on you because that was a great show. And just like how we have too much, or that we complain about, and there was like that gap where there was no Star Wars, and even during that gap of no Star Wars, me and my buddies were playing the Star Wars RPG that was out at the time,
That's
mining
cool.
the source books for information. That's how I found out that Palpatine even had the Emperor even had a last name, was from those books. And so, like, he was talking about how there's a whole 4 year period. I'm like, I didn't even see it. I didn't even notice. I was busy doing nerdy Star Wars things, So
Yeah, because you were still like captivated by that world. Yeah.
absolutely.
Cool.
Me and my friends, we explored things in the game that they're just now getting to in the TV shows and the movies, which I think is interesting.
Oh, that is interesting. What are you currently nerdy about?
Pro wrestling is always going to be one
Yeah.
that I'm always going to be in and out of. I am lucky to have been alive for the first two big boom wrestling periods. The '80s with Hulk Hogan. We won't discuss where he's gone to since then.
Good plan. Good plan.
then then the Attitude Era, where had Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and all those superstars during that time. That was the second boom period. And now it looks like there's a boom period going on now led by guys like Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes. And it's been interesting to watch the evolution of wrestling. Even though I don't watch it week to week all the time, I've always been a fan of everything around it, whether
Yeah.
it's the drama or the business aspect of it. And watching and paying attention to professional wrestling through most of my life, it's helped me understand other subjects, because I can be like, oh, that's like this doing this and this and this. Oh, okay. Because I understand it so well, from my perspective, obviously I don't know everything. I can see it in other things and make sense of things that are happening in front of me.
That's so interesting. And, that makes me think of like what you're saying makes me think of the fact that so many things that we love have common threads at the core when it comes to like stories and how things are run. It's just so fascinating that something that we love can relate to so many aspects of our life.
That's the one thing I think it's common. I'm no expert on this. This is so this is me talking out my ear. It's one thing we have in common as people is we relay information through stories, whether it's lessons or even teaching. Like I had a conversation with my daughter. She's disappointed about something she can't do. And I literally just had that same experience not 3 days beforehand. And I was just as disappointed as she was last night. And it dawned on me while I was talking to her. I'm like, did I tell you about da 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 da? And she's like,
Yeah.
and I explained it to her. It's like, I was disappointed too. And I'm like, I'm really mad about it, to be honest. And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah, but there's nothing I can do about it. And through that story, it like finally diffused everything. And she's like, okay, well, Dad understands then, that kind of thing. So I think that's
Yeah.
how we I think it's
Oh,
one of the better ways that we communicate with each other.
yeah, that's amazing. What is your favorite part about podcasting?
There's a few things. One is the creation aspect of it. Bad Mother Movie Club had been an idea for like running around in my head for a couple years. I even have a couple like start and stops. I have podcasts that I've actually written scripts for that I just haven't done. I've met some really cool people. I kind of figured I'd meet some people doing that, and then it like spawned into like there's some shows I've listened to, and when it's an indie show like ours are, it's easier to get a hold of the creators. The podcast community is really, for the most part, really friendly. And
Yeah.
we're all kind of rooting for each other. It's kind of like how I would guess the indie music scene or indie movie scene would be. Like all of us little people just helping each other and trying to, we're all trying to do the hustle and do the same thing, but we're not doing the same way. So a lot of us don't see it as competition, at least I don't. I'm like, I've always thought like, if I'm the best me that I can be, then I'll win. And I'll help everybody else be their best selves, because that's going to be different for me anyway. You can imitate me and I can imitate somebody else, but you can't be me and I can't be you.
Exactly. There's only one you.
Right.
Yeah.
And in my case, thank goodness.
It's all about collaboration, not competition.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's honestly all the way up to make any kind of meaningful change.
Exactly. What is the most underrated nerdy thing about you?
I want to say I'm a student of subcultures, but I pay attention to every subculture that I've been in. And they're all very, very similar. They all have some kind of gatekeeping on-ramp period. They have their own language. There's a way that the group interacts together, and you all have that one thing in common. It's really the coolest way to meet new friends, because you got this thing in common. What else do we have in common? You know what I mean? I think it's one of the best, honestly, now I think about it, it's probably one of the better ways to make friends as an adult. I turn 50 next month, and making friends is a difficult thing. Not only am I difficult to be with sometimes, ask my wife. I have 2 children, I work, and we all got bills and things, and so I have a lot of responsibilities. And on top of that, trying to get out, and a lot of us don't have a third place, which is like, cheers, where everybody knows your name, like that third place, and for a lot of us, it's stuff like this. I think the community is probably to me the most underrated thing about any kind of nerddom or fandom.
I love that. Community is so important. What is the most random nerdy thing about you?
There's a couple.
Let's hear it.
One is related to something we've already talked about. I have to remember how my friend Jason put it. He's developing his own tabletop role-playing game, and we got to talking, and I told him about this interview, and he just starts laughing. He goes, "You are like a collection of hobbies." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He looks at me, he goes, "Damon, you once played a role-playing game, doing professional wrestling, writing promos on the internet, and they had no rules. So it was a matter of who the best writer was and who got the most attention. You were good at it. And that is the most demand thing I have ever heard in my entire that I could possibly say." So one, I really, 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 really like wrestling. And the other thing is I play tabletop role-playing games, or I play some. I have an absolute absurd amount of PDFs of role-playing games that I just read. I like to read role-playing games. I don't know why. Sometimes the pictures are nice. A role-playing game setting is like somebody saying, "Hey, these are all my toys. Come play with me. This is my play set. Come play with me." You know what I mean? And then do what you want. Do your thing with it. It's kind of like a big set of Legos in a way. Maybe, or maybe not. I don't know. But I really like to see what people come up with. And then there's that other weird part of my brain that it's like, how do you make characters, and how we do this, and how do they put this together, and how do they use this to do this, and what was the just the whole puzzle of the whole thing.
Yeah, like the process and how things are kind of put together. I love that. That's super cool.
And it's a shame that there's very little big money in it, because it is incredible to watch. Like if you've ever played any board games or tabletop role-playing games, and all the work and the play testing, and because humans have to play it, so you have to have people who have no idea what they're talking about, and then getting feedback, and it's a long process, and it's based same processes with video games with less technology. There's so much that goes into it, and just for a little bit of notoriety, and profit. A lot goes into it, and I just, it's another art form needs to be respected.
Yeah, for sure. If somebody wanted to get involved in that, how would you recommend they get started?
There's a couple ways because I started in a different way than most people my age. Because Dungeons and Dragons is the big one,
Right.
and that's where most people start. I didn't start that way. My friends were all theater nerds, and I happened to slide in. They're like, "Hey, we're playing Cyberpunk." They had already graduated past D&D already, so they were playing something different. I'm like, "Well, what's this? I want to play," and that's how I learned. A lot of people do like fantasy, and the Lord of the Rings as a touchstone reference. D&D is a good start because you'll find a lot of players. You know what I mean?
Right. That makes sense.
That is it's the Goliath, right? Once you get into that and learning rules and stuff like that, there are so many YouTube channels on rules and how to make characters, how to optimize characters, what kind of combinations work better with others and things like that. And, we don't want to get into the fiddly stuff because that's a bunch of jargon that's unnecessary. But if you find that that's something you like, you find something in it that you like, and again through the community of YouTube and stuff like that, then if you like a different genre, say you're into urban fantasy, then there are other games such as the Dresden Files Accelerated. There's Monster of the Week. Once you start branching out into different genres, there are so many games. They're starting to become more and more niche that are specific to types of things that people want to play. I can't see not being able to find something. And the best part is with role-playing games, once you've done it enough, if there's something you want that you can't find, there's a whole community to help you make it.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love it. It really is an art.
It really is. It could be done with the D20 system, which is Dungeons and Dragons, or there's a generic system called Savage Worlds that has a lot of support where Joe Blows like myself make things for it. And there's a couple of systems like that. And so there are big communities just around the DIY of it.
Cool. It sounds fun.
It's a blast. It's a blast.
How has fandom changed your life?
I got to do and see things that if I could jump into a time machine and was like, "Hey, you're not going to believe what happens to you when you turn 30. And if
Wait, what happened to you when you turned 30?
Actually, it was when I turned 29 and a half. It was actually when I turned 29. Yeah, it was a month after my 29th birthday. I was on national television.
Wow.
I was in the WWE. I had been watching that since I was a kid. And next thing I know, and I kid you not, I am not making this up. I am standing on national TV, and on one side of me is the first. This will mean something to wrestling fans. The first black NWA World Heavyweight Champion. The NWA was a conglomeration of wrestling before Vince McMahon took it over. We can talk about the history. That could be a whole nother show. But I was standing next to Ron Simmons, who was the first black WCW champion. I remember watching him as a child. And the other side of the guy was a future world champion who was going to end up being one of the longest reigning champions in his era. And here I am. And by the way, just in case you're wondering, I'm 5'4". So I am a tiny person standing between these two behemoths. And and there are times where I still think about that. I'm like, how did I get here?
Did you realize in that moment how legendary that was?
I had no idea. I really didn't. It's taken me a long time to really wrap my head around that whole thing. It was a lot. It was a lot at one time, and there's a part of me that wasn't ready for it. There was a part of me that realizes that just the way my personality makeup goes, that doesn't jive as well. But it took me a while. But now looking back on it, I'm like, I've been very, very lucky. I've been very lucky. And I've got to see and do some extraordinary things that I'm like, cool.
What else? Let's hear it. That's super cool.
That's the big one.
Yeah. But, I mean, that's pretty big.
But a lot of historical things that happened around that time, I call myself like the Forrest Gump of WWE in late 2003, early 2004. Because a lot of newsworthy things happened when I just happened to be there. There are things that would happen and I was like, that I was in the room for. That I'm like, oh, I remember that. That's not exactly how that happened. Things like that. So one of the things that is probably that biggest highlight is I was in the Royal Rumble. I wasn't an official participant.
What's that?
The Royal Rumble. Do you know what a battle royal is?
No.
That looks like a no. Okay. So in wrestling, there's a match type called a battle royal. And it starts off with a bunch of dudes in the ring, usually. And the object is to throw everyone over the top rope. And whoever's left in the ring wins. So everybody's
Okay.
trying to throw each other off. So the Royal Rumble, which was started, I want to say 1989, is a twist on that concept. So it starts off with, it's usually a 30-man rumble. And numbers are picked at random 1 through 30. So obviously, whoever's number 30 has a huge advantage, right? So the numbers 1 and 2 start off and they, battle it out
Oh,
for
I
2 minutes.
see.
Every 2 minutes after that, somebody else comes in. So after 2 minutes, number 3 comes in. After 2 minutes, number 4 comes in. So it could either fill up real quick, or sometimes, like a few years ago, one guy was just chucking people out and he was just standing there by himself for like, a minute and a half. I was not one of those people. What happened? I could actually tell you my whole appearance in the Royal Rumble goes just like this. I run down the ramp and I have the microphone. I run down the ramp and I scream, "Ladies and gentlemen, Ernest the Cat Miller," the actual wrestler. I was his manager. I was his manager and his hype man, right? Well, the other two guys, there were two guys that were in the ring. They were both down. So right as the buzzer went off, that's when I run down there, do the deal. Here comes the cat. And then we slide in the ring. And instead of throwing the guys out, we start dancing because that was our gimmick. While we're having a good time, the guys that were in there finally come to, wake up, see us fools. One guy grabs me, he grabs me by the head. I had a wig on. I had the same amount of hair then, so they had put me in a wig. And it was a riff on the James Brown thing, but that's a whole nother story. So he grabs me by the back of the head and goes to throw me over. Whoop! He pulls the wig off. And he throws it and he kicks me in the stomach and then throws me over the top rope.
Oh my God. That sounds terrifying.
It hurt.
Yeah, I bet. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So interesting. How did you first start pro wrestling?
So my parents had moved to Memphis, Tennessee, which is a hotbed of wrestling. And I went down there to visit. And my dad had said he had met Ken Wayne. When I was a kid, I watched a lot of wrestling. And Ken Wayne was a name I knew. So I meet him and he's I'm 5'4", so he's like 5'7". So like seeing him in real life, I'm like, oh, he's not that big. Okay. And he offered to train me, but I didn't have the money at the time. Right. So fast forward a year and a half and I come back to Louisville and I had gone through some stuff and I'm like, you know what? I've done everything everybody asked of me. I graduated high school. I graduated college. I did all the things, right? I'm going to do something for me, right? And so I call Ken and was like, hey, how much would it cost you to train me? Da, da, da. He's like, he explains it to me. They're like, where are you at? It's like, I'm in Jeffersonville. He's like, oh, my old tag team partner has a school there. So I go in, I meet Danny, who is not much taller than Ken. So he's a short little spark plug of a mean little turd of a man. I love you, Danny. He's never going to hear this. And, and so I signed up there and come to find out OVW, which is where I had signed up, was, do you know anything about baseball?
No.
Okay, no, that's fine. Basically, OVW was like the farm league to the WWE. So basically,
Okay.
the guys that were being trained where I was signing up to go to school, there was another class with a bunch of contract guys in it that they were grooming to become national
Wow.
TV guys.
So this was like a legitimate place.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just happened to be lucky and walked into the one that was connected to the WWE. Then so I entered the amateur class, best $500 investment ever. I get in the advanced class or get in the beginners class. And once I wrapped my head around a couple things, I began to pick up on it. And the teacher was like, oh, like, okay, you have 2 brain cells. Because there's a lot of people who try to do this that have no business being there. And, it's like, oh, what, you have 2 brain cells to rub together. You can do this. So I started, going on the road with Nick and we travel around small town, smaller shows here. And one day he's like, hey, come in during the advanced class, which is where the contract guys are. And I'll have, we'll go over tape. I'm like, okay, cool. So I go in there. And while I'm in there, I see a guy who's in my beginner class. And I don't have any other nice way of saying this. I knew I was better than he was.
Mm-hmm.
As
Yeah, I
a
love that
performer.
confidence.
He's much bigger than me. Like if I had his body, you might actually know my name. Like he had a great body, he just he didn't move well, and the personality didn't just click. The personality thing didn't click for him yet. But I wasn't as big, but I knew I was better than him. So we go over we go over the video, and after we're done, I turn to him and say, "So when do I start?" He's like, "I'll see you Monday."
Love that. Oh my God, that's amazing.
So that happens. We're in a small warehouse, like no air conditioner. The locker room is probably the width of my bedroom. Like it's very not no accoutrement, if you will. So we go from there. Danny buys a new building in Louisville. It's a bigger warehouse now I think it seats, I want to say it seats 500, I think. Whereas the old place seated maybe 75 people. And we had 3 sides of a ring, and it was hot. So it's a big upgrade. The first night show, I was not involved. I still wasn't on TV yet. I was, just an amateur class. And all the boys left. After the show, all the boys left. All the guys who were wrestling the show and stuff. And I was like, there's not a lot of people to help clean. I'll help clean. You know what I mean? Just, pay the whole pay your dues thing, right? The next week, the guy who's running the TV show, his name is Jim Cornette. He's very famous in our circles. And he was somebody I looked up to when I was watching wrestling as a kid. So it was really weird. I'm talking to Jim Cornette. This is crazy. And he's like, I need you to do something for me. He's like, what? He goes, I need you to buy a suit. I need you to buy a tuxedo. I'm like, okay. And like 2 months later, I had started on television locally here on OVW. And because of that is how the guys I met or talked about earlier in the APA, those dudes, that's where they saw me, because they worked together with the guy I was working with, and they're like, we like him. And they kidnapped me on TV, and the next thing I know, I show up on television.
Wow. Yep. What was that like for you, like the first time you were on television?
All that kind of runs together.
Yeah.
It was a lot of, because I hadn't been on OVW television maybe a year. I don't think it had been that long. It was just one of those things that just kind of, everything just fell in line. I'm trying to think. I really don't remember with the APA. I remember more of the second time. The first gimmick was I was the butler for what was called the APA. They were the Acolyte Protection Agency. So they're big barroom brawlers that, everybody paid in beer. It's wrestling. I don't know. And so I got taken away from them, and then they started me with Ernest the Cat Miller, who was doing a James Brown homage. He was a wrestling James Brown. And I remember that debut a little bit more because there was we filmed vignettes and stuff before that. And the weird thing is, now thinking back on it, you got 2 black dudes who, do a James Brown gimmick, which is already old. Vince McMahon has his pop culture references are old. Like he was in his 50s at the time. It's like, oh, 2 black guys are dancing, James Brown. Like I don't know if he had heard of rap yet. So, they build us up, and, we're doing the thing. And then they have us debut in Boise, Idaho on television. I don't know how much you know about Boise, Idaho.
Not much.
When Kat and I went into the ring, I'm pretty sure we doubled the population of black people in Boise, Idaho.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it was one of those things like, if you wanted this to work, could we have started somewhere like Memphis, maybe? That has, strong pop, Atlanta, Detroit. I'm trying to think. I don't know where James Brown's actually from, but like, areas where people would understand. And then the people on TV like watching it and gonna go, oh, we like these guys because the people that are watching them like them. That's how that works.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just one of those weird things. And
that must have been rough though.
Not really. I mean, it didn't work out. But it's like, it's showbiz, and it's one of those things like, once you get in the door, you're trying to stick around and find something that sticks, that works for you better, or something that you can make work. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I just didn't stick around long enough to be able to do so.
What has been the most meaningful part of your journey in fandom?
Taking the lessons I've learned and helping my kids. Especially my oldest she's a preteen, so she's really starting to have passionate feelings about fandoms. And right now she was really into Demon Slayer, and now she's like head over heels for Blue Lock, and there's a character that she really likes. She has an anime crush and all that stuff. And it's fun to like I don't like I share my fandoms with my kids, but I don't know how to put it. I share it with them, but we don't share a whole lot of fandoms yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you share just that drive and that love for fandoms in itself, and I think that is very meaningful.
Yeah, my daughter's really gotten into that, and my son, like, he's into sports, so that might be where his fandom grows from. And it's interesting, as because I've been a fan, and I've been in and out of fandoms my whole life. These will just be other fandoms that I can just ride into, but it's not even the
Hmm.
fandom of the thing per se as a fandom of that part of my kid. You know what I'm saying? Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
love that. Yeah.
Because through these like the relationships with fandoms and the relationships they make in these fandoms, lessons they learn will carry on to whatever they do next, and the people they meet and the friends they'll
Mhm.
make and stuff like that. So my daughter's like head over heels into some things, and my wife's a little worried. I'm like, calm down. She's 11. I was super duper into wrestling at the time and martial arts, and I turned out fine. She did not appreciate that at all.
What does being a nerd mean to you?
Ah, boy. Literally the only answer I didn't write down because I had a hard time with this one when I was thinking about when you sent this to me. It's a break from real life. It's a way to use the skills that you learn growing up socially as well as scholastically to learn about something that you enjoy and really get a kick out of and love and want to learn more about, which is really, in my opinion, what school should be about. Again, back to the community, learning from people who have different perspectives and who have come at it from a different angle than you have. I think it was Star Wars. We were watching the original Star Wars trilogy when we were in high school, so we had seen it. I was 10 when Empire Strikes Back came out, and we were in high school. So that tells you how many times we had seen these movies at this point. And we're watching the end where they're making a TIE fighter run. Hopefully you've seen Star Wars, yes?
Yes, I've seen Star
Okay,
Wars.
cool. All right.
Yeah,
All right.
one thing I'm having that I could say yes to.
1 out of 3 ain't bad. And I noticed there's an Asian pilot, and then he gets blown up. There was an overweight white dude named Porkins of all things, and he gets blown up. There's a black dude, he gets blown up, and then after he gets blown up, I sit there and think about it, like, wait a minute, there's only one black dude in all the Star Wars movies, and he's a criminal. And people are like, dude, you just ruined it for me. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. If I have to see it, you have to see it too. You know what I mean? But it's just not something that they would have
Yeah.
thought about because we all have different perspectives, and that's
Yeah.
and that's what makes to me when those things are discussed with in good faith are some of the best things about fandom, because you can see,
Exactly.
like, there are little things that people see or how stories are told, then you're like, oh, that's okay, you know what I mean? And you can
Hmm.
get more out of it.
Totally. One of my previous guests, he also has his own podcast, Professor Julian Womble. He always says, like, just because you're critical of something doesn't mean you don't love it. Like, it's because you love it that you're critical and you have these conversations because they need to be had. And I think it's beautiful that fandom allows that. For the most part, they do.
We both know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else about your journey that you want to share before we move on to our recommendations?
Yes. Okay, so after my WWE run, if you want to call it that, I tell people I have 3 more minutes. It was about 12 minutes. My 12 minutes of fame, I have 3 more minutes left.
I love that.
So OVW is in town. Like, I'm from here, so it's in town. And things have happened in the wrestling landscape. It's not the WWE's AAA anymore. But I still, have it in. Like, I can go and, hey, guys, and actually go in the locker room. The wrestling is a pretty insular community, like other fandoms, you know what I mean? And I had left it for a long time. And a friend of mine, she's like, hey, you want to go to a wrestling show with me? It's going to be in town. I'm like, ah, sure. So I had no intentions on going. My friend gets me a ticket. We ended up going to the show. And the guy running the show was the guy who got me my job in the first place from
Wow.
all that time ago. And I'm walking in. I didn't think anything about it. I didn't even see him. And all of a sudden I hear Morris, which was my wrestling name. And I'm like, that sounds like, and it's Jimmy. He's like, come here. I'm like, really? Because I hadn't seen him in years. And he gives me a big
Wow.
hug. He goes, hey, I need some time. I was like, I'm coming back to the area. I need some talent. And I'm like, okay. Went and bought a suit and got back on TV.
Wow. Whoa.
It was locally here. It wasn't like a national thing. So I had been there for a few years and I had adjusted my gimmick depending on who I was working with. I was a manager, so I would be the same person, but I would adjust like what I wore to reflect whoever I was with and my actions, that kind of thing. And I noticed during out this period, because I didn't really care what anybody thought of me at this point. And I did very, what I like to call demand things, basically things that made me laugh or, that would get on that just to pester people, just to see, just because. And during that time was probably the most fun I had because I stopped worrying about everybody else and what everybody else thought and worried about being the best me I could be and concentrating on just being a better me. And people started to get into what I was doing because of it. So I guess that was a long way of saying whatever you're into, be into that. Because even 1 in a million, that's still tons and tons of people to hang out with that are in the same thing that you're into. Just do your thing, whatever you're nerdy in. You're not going to please everybody. That's not how this. That's not how this stuff works anyway. And your tribe will find you. You will find your tribe, and as long as you're not hurting anybody, as long as you're not harming anybody, you'll find your tribe. And it's a fun journey. And for me, it's never ending.
I love that message, and I think that's a perfect message that, when we talk about like geeky recommendations to help you embrace your nerdiness, like, sometimes I give practical recommendations, but I think that message of just be who you are, like embrace who you are, be nerdy about what you want to be nerdy about. I think that's the message for today.
I am in agreement. YouTube is probably your best friend. Like to start there. One of my hyperfixations, I wanted to film it, but I got into it too fast and just stopped. I didn't figure out how to make the content for it. I taught myself to juggle last year.
Oh, wow.
No joke. 5 minutes a day. I got pretty decent in 4 months, just working on 5 minutes a day.
That's amazing.
So find your thing. Yeah, YouTube's probably the best way. And then when you're trying to learn something new, break it down into the smallest components that you can handle. And for me, it's 5. I work with my hands. I'm a massage therapist by trade. So I already work with my hands a lot. So I can't sit here and juggle for 30 minutes because it just tires my forearms out. So it's 5 minutes. Once I'm done, I was done. And now I can go grab the thing and knock it out. You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter how small that piece is, as long as you stay consistent. If I did a minute, it may have taken me 8 months to get to be able to juggle halfway decently, but it would have got done.
Love that. So not just be who you are, but be patient with yourself as you get into it as well.
Be kind to yourself. When I listen this back, I'm gonna have to listen to myself on that one. Be kind to yourself. Imitating other people and trying to keep up with their success only leads to mental ruin.
Yes, very true. Very true. Comparing does nothing. Like you said in the beginning, everybody has their own story and their own journey, their own nerdy journey.
Absolutely. And it's your story, and it may seem normal or mundane to you, to the individual you listening, but you tell that story to somebody else, they're going to be shocked that you made it through, that you made it around, that it actually happened, because we don't know until we hear it from somebody else.
Very true. Well, Damon, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was a lot of fun, and I just really appreciate your perspective on just nerdiness and stories, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was fun. Where can people find you?
Yeah, any social media. I'm not really on Twitter anymore. The only thing my dead name is Elon Musk. I'm everywhere else. Instagram. I'm on Instagram a lot. I'm on Threads a lot. And it's at Damon Does, all one word, 2 Ds.
And where can they find your podcast?
Anywhere fine podcasts are downloaded. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts. We do them all. I think I'm on everything.
And of course, I'll share links to everything, your socials, your podcast in the show notes. So everybody definitely go check that out.
Please and thank you.
Yeah. Thank you again so much for being here. And thank you everybody for listening. If you could please please leave That Nerd Thing a 5-star review wherever you are listening to this episode. That would mean so much to me. The numbers really do matter with the algorithm and getting the word about the show out there. You can follow the show wherever you're listening to it on your favorite podcast platform. You can reach out to me at thatnerdthingpod@gmail.com and follow the show on Instagram and TikTok at thatnerdthingpod. And again, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye.